Hello everyone, welcome to our next Sales Hacker webinar, how to supercharge your sales kickoff and make the results last. It is 9 o'clock California time. We're going to give it another 60 seconds to let people get out of whatever meeting they're coming out of and log in, so just hang tight with us for 1 minute. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into everything. My name is Richard Harris. I'm the Director of Sales Training and Consulting over at Sales Hacker. We are very excited to be talking about sales kickoffs today. We've got a very distinguished panel of guests that we're happy to have with us. Couple of things. First, we are going to record this session, so it will be available afterwards in case you want to jump off because you've got another call, or in case you want to share this webinar with someone else so that they can listen to it and gather some of the golden nuggets we hand out. Also, we do like these webinars to be very interactive, so please feel free in the question box to post a question. That would be very, very helpful. We want to make sure we answer your questions, not just answer the questions about sales kickoff that the four of us think are the most important ones. And then the third thing I want to ask people to do is go into the chat feature. Please introduce yourself. Maybe tell us how big your sales team is. That would be a really great thing for us as the host to understand. And then obviously as those questions come in, we can put a little perspective around maybe the size of your team. So there's a little chat feature over on the right-hand side. So we'd love it if you would go in and do that and share a little bit about yourself. So let me go ahead straight into the introduction. So first of all, I want to introduce our sponsor, which is SAVO. So SAVO, thanks again for hosting yet another outstanding webinar topic. We really appreciate it. We're joined by the Principal of Sales Enablement over there, Christie Nelson. So Christie, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Next are two people that I've gotten to know very well over the last few years. One is Jake Dunlap, who is the CEO of Skaled. Jake, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Excited for the topic.
Exactly. Nothing like doing this at the end of the quarter, right?
That's right, man. Let's do it.
Let's do it. And then, of course, we have Pete Kazanjy, who is the CEO of Modern Sales Pros, and has just done a tremendous amount of work in the sales space and building sales organizations, running sales organizations, and even had a company get acquired by Monster.com. So he's been through all the positive things that come out of the startup world that most of us live in. So, so let's talk a little bit about SKO as a whole, right? They can be expensive, right? From a cost and a time perspective. Just from each of your perspectives, how do you approach planning to ensure that your team gets what they want out of this event? And maybe Christie, since you are the host, ladies first, we'll let you go ahead and jump in.
Why, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, it is. It's a big event, and I think the focus is to make sure that whatever you are introducing, training on, that you can carry that through for the remainder of the year. So I think it's important to get aligned with your CEO, your board, understand what the company goals and objectives are for the year, so that you can start to kind of build that as the theme and the agenda, for the event. And there's lots of tactical things that you can do to ensure that you're preparing and planning, up until that point.
That's great. Pete, how do, in your experience with the different size organizations you've run and built, how did you guys approach this?
Yeah, I think the panel was talking a little bit about this before the broadcast started, but I think it kind of keys off of what Christie was saying, which is you really have to understand what your goal is. Like, what is the goal of the sales kickoff that you're doing? Are you a large organization and it's just business as usual and you're trying to just refocus, re-energize, rally the troops, that sort of thing? Okay, well then put the wood behind that arrow and understand if that's the goal, what are the KPIs that you want to instrument going forward that proves that you achieved that? What's the content that you need? Or is it a new product launch? Is it a smaller organization where it's less about rah, 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 and it's more about, hey, we're just going to take a day on site within our own organization and really take this as an opportunity to train hard on soft spots that we've had previously. So I think that like the first most important thing is to understand what the goal is and have alignment on your team around how you're going to address that, because that's the thing that everything else kind of cascades from.
Yeah, I agree. Jake, how about you? What are you guys doing at Skaled?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, make sure you know what people want and what the organization needs, and follow through, which we've already talked about, are the most important pieces. I think the one way to make sure that, you know, your sales kickoff isn't successful, or how about, it depends. I mean, success of like getting everyone excited, like what's the ROI of that? TBD, right? But I think that the key that most people don't do is they just don't have that rigid of a follow-through plan. So really, whenever we think SKO, I think the kickoff is the beginning, and anything you can do the next 2-4 weeks to show quick wins from that, I think is absolutely critical. So just thinking about how can we immediately start to activate this, and you know, a lot of that comes from frontline leadership, you know, buy into the topics and what you're working on. So I think the key is, as Christie alluded to briefly earlier, making sure that we have a go-forward plan and making sure you show the team quick wins really early, so they know that this isn't just, they get in the habit year over year over year of like, whenever we go to sales kickoff, like we learn things and we actually do things. It's not just, you know, lip service.
Oh, this is real and important.
Yeah.
Totally. I sort of tell my clients to fill in these blanks, which is, you know, at the end of the sales kickoff, we expect the sales team to be better at blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah.
Define what those are when you're talking about those KPIs that Jake and Pete were talking about. And then you also have to go a step further and go, do you even have baseline measurements of that?
Yeah.
What I've also seen too is that if you ask that question of the marketing team and of the sales leader and the CEO, what would you like the sales team to be better at, blank, blank, and blank, you're going to come up with, you know, 9 different answers, but that's going to help you build out the right content that makes sure everybody gets what they want, but also allows for the sales reps to walk away with something very, very tangible. So I agree with all 3 of you on that piece. You know, I think my only other piece of advice too is on sales kickoffs is that, you know, the brain can only absorb as much as the butt will tolerate sitting in a chair. Right? You know, once you've sat there for 6 hours, you know, you better change something up, otherwise you're going to have some big problems.
Yeah. I would just add too that making sure that you've gone back and reviewed what has worked in the past last year, what went good, what went wrong, and if you survey your audience, you know, what did they want more of, what do they want less of, so that they, you know, the salespeople really feel heard and you incorporate some of the things that they've asked for. So I think especially for those, you know, veteran reps who have been here, you know, have SKOs with you year after year, you know, you want to keep them engaged and give them something that they're looking for too.
Yeah, I think that segues great in sort of our next question. Christie, you may have sort of answered it a little bit, which is, you know, what are the best practices that you have in preparing the content for the SKO? What's the one tip in planning that you think is often overlooked? Obviously, getting some feedback from the reps is definitely one of those things. You know, Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that what I've seen that's been most successful is lots of interactions between groups, meaning there's kind of this mix of, we'll call it like classroom-style lecturing, but what I've seen successful is how do we then take a concept and then break into small teams around topics, to where then we get like different people talking and really selling each other on the idea and coming up with a plan and talk tracks in ways that they would talk about, you know, this new lead generation thing or whatever the topic is. So I think to me it's you have to activate during the sessions, to your point of that kind of the butts in seats. If it's just lecture, it doesn't matter if it's the most entertaining person on the planet. The more that it's kind of teach, activate, you know, and getting them talking, it's just so critical to kind of keep that learning going for 6 or 8 hours, as opposed to feeling like, you know, a long day of, you know, college classes.
More like seminar.
Right. Here's your Tony Robbins seminar. Pete, what about you? What do you think are some of the best practices in preparing the content?
I think that's a really great point, Jake, because I'm really happy that we're doing this webinar, because it actually made me think through these different practices. So one thing is, it's kind of like onboarding. Like if you think about your onboarding like camp that you might have for your organization, like my buddy over at Lever, they call it ramp camp or whatever, but a non-trivial component of it is like doing some stuff, right? Like sparring between SDRs and each other, or AEs and each other, and things like that. That's actually something that we learned at the Modern Sales Pro group, where initially we was kind of, our meetups were just like people presenting and sitting back, but then when we got people around tables, the retention went way up. So I think that like stealing from onboarding in that regard can be really effective, because like obviously that's a great way, it's like we're re-onboarding people. I think the other thing that organizations oftentimes mess up, and this is before I was a founder of a company and a sales leader and what have you, I come from a product management and product marketing background, so I'm a big collateral junkie, and I think that a lot of times organizations don't collateralize things as much as they should, because they try to go like, run by the seat of their pants. Oh, we don't actually need a demo script. We actually don't need some slides or some screenshots or what have you. And I think by investing in that to make sure that you have those assets, even if it's like a minimum viable set of those assets, is going to help make those sessions all the better. Because otherwise, you might be talking in abstractions and generalities. So if you actually have some concrete materials and make sure that you invest in that, such that then that can be used during the sessions, it can be referred to during the sparring sessions, and then now you have like, a goodie bag that folks can take home with them, and you use the kickoff as a forcing function to instantiate that. That can be something that's really helpful, and oftentimes people forget to do.
And so, just so I understand what you all are talking about, are you suggesting there needs to be role plays set up and created, and people break into these small groups and do role plays? Or Pete, is it more along the lines of what you've done? I've been to some of your MSP events where we just have a topic and we discuss it around a smaller table of where you can have an intimate conversation with 6 or 8 people. What do y'all think?
I can jump in there too. I think it depends on what the focus is. If one of your focuses for the kickoff is skill development, then you definitely need to break out and incorporate some of that role play. I like, Pete, what you said. Having those materials there available, ready for them to start using right away, is going to be easier for them to kind of incorporate that once they get back in their home offices and in the field. So you definitely have to do the breakouts. Totally agree, you can't sit there for 6 hours. Another thing is I feel like salespeople, appreciate learning from their peers and other successful sales reps. So the more that you can incorporate, reach out to those top performers ahead of time. What are some of the top objections you're hearing? Let's put together some messaging that we can, use and provide to the rest of the team. So obviously, people, want to replicate those top performers. So really tapping into them and what they're doing to be successful in the field, and then creating some tribal knowledge peer review sessions, right within that sales kickoff is really effective.
Or you might even already know the answer. Like, you might already know what the right objection handling is. You already know what the best practices are, but like, you're just the director of sales enablement, so what the hell do you know, right? So what you can do is you can grab that customer success story of that rep who's just like a total killer out of Milwaukee or whatever, and have them kind of be like your customer success story for the thing that we already know is the best practice that we want to adopt, right? Like, that was something that, like what Jake was talking about earlier about getting like the quick wins afterwards. This is almost like the proof points ahead of time. Like, the reason why we're presenting that you should do this is because Susie does it and she's totally amazing. And now we're going to do role playing where you emulate Susie doing this best practice. And then afterwards, you guys feed back to us in the next couple of weeks how the Susie method made it such that you were awesome as well. And like, doing that, like that whole cycle is really great.
Yep.
Yeah, we've done that before at some other SKOs I organized where we had the reps come in and they had one slide to present their best case from the year, and they had to list things like sales cycle, and they had to do the research, and it took this many emails and this many phone calls, and these were the biggest objections, and these were the points of clarity that happened through the conversation, so that we could really sort of break that down and share that. And it was a good way to get sort of the veteran reps in a leadership role, even though they sort of do it, they might do it begrudgingly. Because they don't necessarily want to, share their secrets, but it's a good way to make that happen and get the conversation going, and then they end up turning around and loving being the expert in the room at the moment. So that's great. What best practices do you have for goal setting, and ensuring your focus is on the right business objectives? How do you guys each do that? Pete, you want to give a whirl on that one?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the notes that I took ahead of time. I mean, I think it goes back to one of the things I wanted to mention earlier is I think about SKO as almost kind of like a marketing event, like going to Dreamforce or going to whatever, and but really what you're doing is you're trying to deliver an outcome from an internal marketing exercise. So the same way that you should have KPIs of like, what is your goal for Dreamforce, or what is your goal for Serious Decisions, or what is your goal for XY or HR Tech or what have you? Is it a certain number of leads that come out of it in the case of those marketing events? Well, if you happen to be addressing, like maybe there's a new product launch, like let's use Monster and the talent and acquisition as an example. You would want to say, hey, the sub-focus of this part of this sales kickoff is we want everyone to understand how to sell passive candidate recruiting through Talent Bin. And that's what we have. The content is here for that, and we have the best practices that we've pulled in for the senior reps and so on and so forth. Oh, and by the way, we want to see everyone sell, everyone do 5 Talent Bin demos over the next month and close 1 deal, and then measure that accordingly. But again, that's tied back to whatever the goal was. So just set the goal, or sorry, set the strategy, and then like what is the KPI that's going to validate that we actually did the thing we said we were going to do.
That's great. And by the way, did you kill that unicorn on your wall yourself by hand? Is that what we're seeing? Is that behind you?
I think I imported him from China, and then my dad mounted him.
All right. That's another topic. So there's actually a question coming in from the audience that has to do with some of these materials, right? When do those materials change, right? So let's say you are doing this SKO in January and you do want to have some handouts, available, and you want to have some best practices and some strategies. How do you know when to change things? What do you change? How do you set yourself up for that sort of for the year? I think, Jake, you said earlier, the kickoff is just the beginning, right? And it kind of needs to happen all year long. How do y'all each sort of approach that? Maybe, Jake, I don't know if you have an answer for that one.
Yeah, so is the question what materials to prep? Is that what the question is?
Well,
I can't see it.
Excuse me. The question is, what materials do you change, and how often do you change them after the sales kickoff, right? So you're going to come in and you're going to make an announcement, you're going to have some new theory, whatever, and I think they're talking a little bit more about not the marketing collateral materials, but maybe the sales collateral materials.
Right. Yeah, I think that just like you have a roadmap for like success of what you want to see, or milestones or KPIs like Pete talked about. You have a milestone for the materials or process creation as well too. I mean, I think it's important that you come in and you have like the fundamentals in place before. Pete kind of discussed this at length, but you need to make sure that you have the materials that in a good enough place to where it's like, wow, this is serious. It's not like this is an idea, here's this like crappy one paper that their VP of sales made, or like a 2-pager, that it's like we have the collateral to kind of get us at least like past month 1 or month 2, like we have enough meat behind it to where everyone realizes like, wow, like we've invested time, we've invested effort, like this is a real thing, because the salespeople aren't going to really be asking for that like level 3, 4, 5 collateral, because again, step 1 is they need to understand the new product. Right. Step 2 is how do we position it? Great. So if we have that for the kickoff and for the first 2 to 4 weeks, we're probably fine. So I think about the behaviors and how they're probably going to change in the sales team, and make sure that you have enough collateral to drive that initial change, and then that should evolve over time, or that should evolve so you don't have to have everything, but you need to have enough meat to where it's like, yeah, this is serious.
Yeah, I can comment too. One of the things we've adopted is this concept of an agile approach to sales, to our sales organization, and it's something that our CEO has talked a lot about, was at CEB, and we've incorporated, here at SAVO. So it really expects change, is going to occur throughout the year, and accounts for that and plans for that. So it's kind of a new way of thinking about sales enablement. And it's borrowed from that, Pete, you probably are very aware based on your background of that, technical product development, getting away from that waterfall and having it focus more on that, kind of responsive planning iterative modification based on, what's happening in the field and the market around us, and then having that quick delivery back to sales. So you should expect that your materials, your sales, focused materials should change significantly throughout the year based on lots of, market, things in the market, competitive, new product, things like that. So I think having that agile framework sets you up to make those materials available to your sales team throughout the year.
Yeah, I know that that's something that we would do a lot. I mean, again, the talent and sales organization was only like 20-ish people when we were acquired. But when the product is continually changing, and the product is changing because, it's getting better, you're gathering new requirements from the world, and engineering is making them. But then when engineering ships that new feature, like drip marketing in Talent Bin, well, there was a reason why that was shipped, because it's going to deliver this ROI. There's a reason why that feature was given engineering resources, and then we went and spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars of engineering resources in order to build it. Okay, we probably should collateralize it now, right? And we probably shouldn't wait 11 months or 10 months until sales kickoff. So in our case, it was almost like part of the product release process. It was like, okay, cool, it's now live. That means that it's Pete's responsibility, because again, lapsed product marketer, to make new slides around it and and new value proposition stuff. Okay, cool. Now what's going to happen with that? In our case, we use ClearSlide as kind of our not amazing content management system for that, but at least our reps would always have the tip of the branch slide deck that had those incremental slides that were in there, and we would embed it in our sales team meeting, like, okay, cool, here's the new product that shipped, there's new slides that are based on this. We didn't do a very intentional way of like housing that content, but obviously there are technological solutions out there, like I think SAVO makes one around housing that content, making sure that reps have access to it, and pushing it out on an ongoing, I like the term agile basis, because you don't want to wait 9 months or what have you, because that new feature is live, and your win rate should go up because now you're now providing more value. You're beating people in competitive situations better because that feature has shipped, if and only if the sales reps know that it exists and can position it in order to win those deals.
Yeah, Christie, could you share a little bit more about this sort of agile concept that we've talked about? If you've never done sort of agile and you're looking at it from this perspective of this sort of sales enablement or sales engagement, can you break it down a little bit into some smaller components that people go, oh, now I understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the concept is basically just like, our buyers, our sellers are mobile and socially connected. So we want to meet them where they live, right? We want to be able to kind of incrementally deliver smaller bite-sized pieces of information that they can use immediately, in the field. So the principles of being responsive and planning, allowing for your resources to have the time to constantly pivot on the materials that were created, being connected with all the different departments in your organization that are making these changes, so you're aware of it. Having regular cadence with your field, sales, to see what is working out there, what messaging is working. This one isn't. Let's remove that. Let's change it. And then having that, obviously, tools and technology to support, quickly delivering that, prescribing it, to sales where they're in their mobile device, in their CRM, etc.
That's great. Thanks for that explanation. So we're gonna go into the danger zone, call it the lightning round, where we've got questions coming in from the audience that we have not prepared our answers for. So let's see how we do. In no particular order, right? We've got someone calling saying, hey, they're asking the question of they're looking to redesign their entire channel area. And their question isn't really about the channel, but if you're going to make a major shift in the way you do business, do you do that at the SKO, or do you do it before the SKO, and then the SKO is the time where you really sort of buckle down on it and really make sure that everybody understands what's happening? And I'll let anybody jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo Pete talked about this it being like kind of like a SK is like part marketing, part action. I don't think it's probably the right move at all to do like a company pivot in an SKO. I think that the former that you mentioned about using that as the buckle down time, as opposed to announcing it maybe a couple of weeks, or a few weeks ahead of time to allow people to kind of wrap their heads around what's happening or what this means for the company, etc. I think is really, really critical. So that way we can kind of re-level set expectations. So that way we all get together. We're moving forward. This thing's happening. Like let's do this thing. So I would argue that the kickoff is like everyone's coming in excited. We're gonna get hammered with our coworkers, and you're like, and now we're pivoting. Like, oh, then everyone just gets drunk and like complains the whole time. So no, I'd say you want to implement some change in advance, and then use that as kind of this really positive energy, like go forward momentum plan.
Jake, when is your SKO, Jake? I want to come to it.
We just had our holiday party Friday. It is our holiday party.
That invite.
3 a.m. karaoke, but
nice.
It was good.
That's amazing. I think that to the question here, I really, as I'm thinking, as this agile concept that Christie was talking about is kind of like marinating my brain right now. I'm really kind of liking that because in startups, there is what's known as like lean startup methodology, which really comes from agile as well. Like all of this comes from Toyota lean manufacturing way back in the 1980s. And so really it's about like proving an initial case and then before you scale it up. And so in this case, like the question here is like, have you tested this new theory, this new channel theory at a bench scale first? Because we should do that with, an initial set of partners or initial set of customers or initial set of reps in order to prove that it is a better way of doing our go-to-market than our existing status quo. Right, so like as a sales leader, a sales operations person who's maybe kind of like product managing and evolving and refining the organization, you want to test that at the bench scale first. Okay, cool. Does it work? Do we have the ROI indicators that our reps are more productive or our lead conversion is higher and so on and so forth? Okay, fantastic. Now it seems like we should double down and maybe scale this out more. And so then that might be like pre-announcing it, having all that material to say this is the reason why this is better as indicated by feedback from the market, which then was tested at a statistically significant level. So don't worry, this isn't just some boondoggle BS from leadership. This is actually going to make us more successful and make you more money. And then you hammer that home at like the next SKO or maybe like a quarterly webinar, a QBR or what have you. So I think that like versus just like, hey, ta-da, we don't know if it works, but here it is. You probably don't want to do it that way.
Christie, have you guys seen something like this? I mean, based on what you guys do, and maybe some of your clients do a lot of sort of pivoting or shifting on certain things. Any feedback from what you've seen out in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think totally agree with Pete and Jake. You don't want to make that SKO a total surprise. You want to test out and talk about that big announcements prior to, and then the SKO is definitely more, hands-on, actionable. Let's now pull up our sleeves and get this done as a team and group together. So I totally agree.
That's great. So the next question, I'm getting this one a ton. I'm sure you guys have all experienced this one too. It's bringing in the SDRs, right, to your SKO. How do you get them in? They tend to be, for the most part, earlier in their career. They often are, through nobody's fault, just a little quieter in the SKO, right? Whether there's an ego thing between the SDRs and the AEs, or they don't have enough knowledge yet. How do you engage them? How do you get them to participate? Because so much and so often the time is spent around things for the sales rep. I would even extend this question to go, well, what about customer success? The sales funnel now has 3 distinct channels. Right, You've got your SDR, you've got the AE and customer success, and the value that can come out of an SKO really does touch all 3 of those pieces of the funnel. So what do you guys see? What are you hearing? What do you recommend?
Nick, you do a bunch of SDR stuff, right? Oh, sorry, Kristen.
I was just going to say that it was never a question not to include them, and we have SDRs, our account executives, account managers, and customer success that all participate, and we're expecting them to be a fully participating member. So there's a lot of team building work that you can do depending on how you're organized. If somebody works directly with an SDR or a customer success, there's lots of different team building exercises that you can do that directly relate to how they work together in their scenarios out in the field. So never a question not to include them. I think it is a challenge. Sometimes you have varied skill sets there, right? So you have to do some things to appease each of those profiles.
Yeah, I think we use, whenever we're doing kickoffs, and customer success is 100% a part of it, is we divide and conquer, meaning like your kickoff, you shouldn't just have like one centralized session, meaning like especially if it's the 2 days, it's like we're doing a track for the SDRs, we're doing a track for sales, and we're doing a track for account management, and then we bring them together at like really smart inflection points to where it's very applicable. Because again, to your point about like people's tolerance, like nobody wants to sit through 4 hours of things that are like not applicable to me in my life for the next like 2 years. So I think the methodology that we tried to put in place, and I've seen be successful, is like we have the SDR kickoff. It's all the sales kickoff, right? But the SDRs are doing this for the day. The account managers are doing this for the day. The sales team is doing this, and then there's maybe a point or two of intersection. New product release, right? That's a great one. Common objections. Account strategy, how to think about penetrating an account and growing it. Like all of those things have kind of natural bleed between generating new meetings or working with your current customers. So I think it's really important actually that you have separated talk tracks and separated sessions that are specific for the goals for that group, and then you try to look for kind of the points to bring it together. And that's for account management and SDRs too.
Yeah, there was a thread on MSP the other day talking about this, and I think a lot of it was people asking about the cost benefit when your SKO is like flying people around and stuff. But I think that kind of the historical version of an SKO where people come in to right here and they from the field and what have you, that I think it maybe reflects how software used to be sold, like when you're selling on-prem software or what have you. And so to the extent that the sales motion has changed and you now have a more multi-threaded sales, more abstracted with SDRs and AEs, and now because we are in a SaaS world, customer success is incredibly important because the ongoing revenue that you're going to get from year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is far outweighs the initial revenue that you're going to get from year 1 getting in the door. The SKO should really reflect that. And if you're saying things like, well, we can only afford to fly in one subset, well, then maybe you should think about how you can redirect that budget and say, well, maybe what we can do is we can do more virtual stuff, or we can deliver this content via, via the internet or via tooling or what have you, such that we can nail the SDR component, the AE component, the CS component. Because if you're only weaponizing one part or if you're only investing in one part of that specialized, the account team, you're probably going to have weakness in the other places, and that's going to show up in the business results. So it's probably not a good upside or like a good outcome.
Yeah, and I'd like to add too that we should, as you talk about all those things, we should not forget our sales engineers. Someone politely reminded me that they are equally as important as the SDRs and the customer success and the AEs. So thank you, Nick, for that nice reminder. We have a couple of people who have some very large organizations, 250 account executives, thousands. And I think we've answered it, but maybe it's a good place to sort of say it in a different way, is how do you get 250 people engaged in an all-day SKO, right? That's, if you're going into the classroom style, like we said earlier, the brain will only absorb so much. What have you all seen work, and what have you seen not work in those large organizations?
I'll just go back to the way that I answered the last question. You have to break it out into relevancy. Meaning you can't think of it as 250 people coming for a day. I'd argue if you're going to get 250 people together, a day is not right. It should be at least 2, if not 3 days. And it needs to be as relevant as possible, meaning break out, if you have an SMB group, a mid-market group, an enterprise group, and same thing, how you break out your SDRs or sales engineers, make sure that you cannot think of it as 250 people. You have to really think about it as the individual groups. And then again, you have your keynote session, and you have these kind of intersection points, and really look for those, look to add those. Again, there's kind of people talking from different groups, but make it similar, right? Don't have like the SMB group brainstorming with the enterprise group. Like, I'm not saying like, yeah, would that be great for their professional development? Sure, but is the enterprise rep going to get out a lot of it? No. So I think if you really have to look at this as like, you're actually running probably like 5 different concurrent kickoffs over a 2-day period and looking for points of intersections and pump up.
Yeah, and I would just agree with you, Jake. I would just add that you need to get them out of their seats. So create exercises that get them using the materials and the concepts that you're delivering right then and there. Because if they don't start using it right away, putting them on stage, less likely that they're going to incorporate that into their normal sales activities, going forward. So get them up and moving and active and trying this stuff out.
And I'd like to spin this a little bit for Pete. Pete, with the MSP group that you run, I've been to some of your events, and you have 75 people coming from all different kinds of organizations. They also are different roles of sales. There's sales leaders, there's sales ops, there's all kinds of people, there's SDRs. And you break us up into smaller groups. Explain to the group maybe just sort of how you do that, because I think that's a really good blueprint for people to go, oh, that's a good way to try and do something like that.
Yeah, I think all we do, so modern sales is the sales operations enablement and leadership community. And what we do is we're just trying to do exactly what Jake said, which is like break it down into a small enough chunk that it's like the content is super relevant. And so in our case, when we do our group projects and discussions, we have, I split up folks by size of sales organization and maturity of the organization, right? Because you don't necessarily, like the maturity of somebody's sales operations function at like LinkedIn is super different than like the sales operations function at like Lever, for instance. So if you take that and then you bring it over to your SKO, I think it's the same thing that Jake was saying. And as Jake was describing that, and as Christie was talking about that, I would kind of like let my mind drift over to like really great events like Dreamforce or like maybe even your customer conference. And you have the same thing going on. If you just look at this from a customer-centric standpoint and our customers happen to be the SDRs, the sales engineers, the account executives, or what have you, what is the content that's going to be relevant to them? You see Dreamforce is phenomenal at this, right? Like you've got an overarching message, Internet of Things, like whatever the flavor of the year is for Salesforce, like Internet of Things or, the customer journey or this, that, or the other thing. And then it's like Tony Robbins and then buckets for like the sales operations, the sales enablement thing, the leadership thing, the marketing thing. And so I think if you can do the same thing, if you have a 250-person organization, what does that look like? The big guy, the different tracks, bring them back together for the other thing that's applicable, et cetera, and then break into those units where it's 10 people together or 5 people together, where you can just make those teams ahead of time. You have the org chart, you know what team everyone is in, you can assign everyone to each other and say, great, now you're going to go and that thing you just learned from on the stage, you're gonna spar about that right now. And then we're going to have another stage thing in an hour. It keeps it fresh.
Pete's all about the sparring. It must be a bloodbath by the time it's over.
Our SDRs and AEs loved it. The thing, you guys are enablement folks, so it's shocking to me that we don't, like in high-end athletics, like your coach coaches you on something,
yeah.
And you just do repetitions until like you can't do it anymore. Like whether it's swings in the batting cage or like coming out of your three-point stance or what have you, and it's amazing to me that we don't. Maybe it's because in a professional environment we're kind of embarrassed to do like repetitions that aren't customer facing or what have you, but I swear to goodness, man, like doing a pitch like 5 times where it's like stop again, and like providing permission to do that is really transformative, and then people like it once you've done it. So having a forcing function like an event to do that in, where it's like a safe place and like this is the time when we do that, is really helpful.
That's great.
Yeah, the feedback that I've gotten over all the years is, oh, you know, role plays, this is terrible, I hate this, it's uncomfortable, I'm in front of my peers. And then after, you know, the event, that was great, we really need it, I'm so glad you pushed us to do this, it's making me better in the field. I mean, so yeah, you got to push back the, you know, uncomfortable nature of it and somehow make it fun and engaging, but, you know, it's totally necessary.
So this is a really good question coming from the audience that's, you know, this middle manager, right, the sales manager, the person who runs the sales team. It's not so much a question around, you know, how do you get them engaged, but what do you do with them to get them better at their management skills? Do you build a separate track for the sales managers during the SKO? Or are the sales managers there to absorb somewhat like a rep, but then the managers might need to go to an offsite for half a day to work on their management skills? Because that's the one thing I'm seeing a lot too, is there's not a lot of great sales management training happening these days. How do you guys see that happening in the SKO, and what's your thoughts on it? Maybe Jake, start with you.
Yeah, I think you answered the question too. It's especially in this, like, we're all such in like the startup bubble, and you know, it's good that there's somebody here with like a 250-person AE org. If you have a 250-person AE org, let's say, I mean, you probably have 30 frontline managers. Of course, yes, absolutely, you should have separate tracks. Like, yes, we need to have a leadership, you know, as a part of this. If not, if you're in, you know, a smaller company, then yeah, more like a manager offsite where you're focusing on those skills. And because, in my opinion, the managers should be leading a lot of the SKO sessions, right? Just similar how we talked about reps leading sessions, the leaders shouldn't be the only people that are the executive leaders or whatever, shouldn't be kind of like the main stars of this. It should be those managers getting those professional speaking skills and understanding how to put together like a training plan, et cetera. So I think it's early stage company, you separate, but as you get larger, you have to have events that are 100% just focused on leadership development. And I think you know, unfortunately, it's usually only larger companies that you get that level of focus. We just tend to ignore it. You know, to your point, Richard, with early stage companies, we're like, you're a leader now, so just go figure it out and go manage 10 people and go, you know, it's terrible. But yeah, I think that unfortunately, like that's what you have to do. I think your leaders at early stage companies should be leading the SKO, and then after you have, you know, enough to where it makes sense. You know, I don't know if I have like the exact number, but I would say if your organization is 250, you probably have enough leaders for absolutely. You know, you're bringing in different types of speakers. It's a completely different feel about how we're going to be better leaders and our company values in 2017, as opposed to SVR team, how we're going to set more meetings. So I think it just depends on the stage you're at as a company.
I think the sales managers have a very critical role because as we're talking about, you know, these SKO events, they're just this one big event, but you're really looking to benefit from everything that you're doing throughout the entire year. And the sales managers are the ones that are going to be holding people accountable to all of the learnings, all of the different topics and the agenda items that you covered at SKO. So I think to what Jake said, involving them, they should be leading, you know, some of these breakout sessions, et cetera. They should have this material down just as much as the people, you know, planning the SKO, so that again, they can carry that message throughout the year and improve their coaching, you know, as well.
And I think that when we think about SKOs, a lot of the time we think about new product releases, or we have a strategic focus for the year, whether it's churn abatement or competitive wins or what have you. And so a lot of it is kind of like standardization. It's distribution of information, best practices, and standardization, and then the metrics associated with that. When we think about that at the point of the reps, the SDRs, AEs, AM, CSM, SEs, et cetera, but there's a meta level, which is there are best practices and standardization around how to manage. And like Jake was mentioning, a lot of times when you have early managers, it's like, hey, you're a good AE, people look up to you, poof, you're an AE manager. That doesn't necessarily mean, ideally you should do an onboarding, right, a managerial onboarding, but it's like, hey, this is how we run stand-ups. or this is how we run pipe reviews, and this is how, and these are the metrics that you should be looking at. Oh, and by the way, here are the relevant dashboards in question and what have you. And so those best practices oftentimes are tribal knowledge. And so having an opportunity for that to be hammered on in the SKO environment, especially if it's aligned to the larger strategy, like, hey, we're doing a product release, and like, let's use Monster and Talent Bin. We're doing Talent Bin, your reps, these are the goals associated, this many demos, this many deals that are closing. Oh, by the way, managers, this is how you're going to measure that, right? That we're actually having this new product attachment, and here are the dashboards, and this is how to have those conversations and back check that that's actually happening, as opposed to just like leaving it up to luck or for them to figure it out.
That's great. Really solid feedback from everybody. Thank you. This is a fun question, and this might get into some of Pete's sparring. But who owns building the SKO? Is it the head of sales or is it the head of marketing?
I mean, probably the head of, well, I mean, it depends how big the organization is, but I would say the head of sales most likely. I mean, as you get larger, hopefully the sales enablement or sales operations org is kind of owning the execution with kind of higher level themes from both. But yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be seen as like mutually exclusive, right? It's like maybe sales, head of sales is kind of working on the broader strokes of the things that we need to accomplish, but marketing needs to lead, a portion of it. So I don't know if it's that mutually exclusive. I think the direction has to come from the company goals, which ultimately the CRO, the VP of sales, owns chunks of that, depending on the organization, where marketing might own, the SDRs are part of it. But I think that you have to have input from the different groups. Somebody else talked about, having input from the reps as well too. So I think you have to take input, but the VP of sales, at the end of the day, those people report into you, or your leaders and your leaders' leaders. And I think you have to make sure that you're controlling the content to an extent and kind of keeping the noise out, because you might have different priorities. Marketing might want to get in there and talk about XYZ, product might want to get in there and talk about XYZ, but that as a company, maybe we've got a better plan to roll that out, so we actually want to focus instead that 4 hours or that half day on a different topic that we feel is going to move the needle. So I think sales leadership has to own it, but again, it's kind of dependent on the goals of the SKO. If it's more lead generation marketing focused, then marketing needs to own a big chunk of it.
Great. So how does, and there's sort of two questions sort of wrapped into one. We had a question from the audience that says, hey, look, we want to accelerate volume and velocity, one, into the funnel and then through the funnel, shortening the sales cycle. How do you do that at an SKO? And I wonder if it has something to do with this other question we've talked about, is how are you using data to help you plan your SKO, right? Are you using a lot of data to try and say, gosh, this is what we did last year, we have enough data, let's see how we can improve that?
Well, I think the note that I took down on this was that really, if the purpose of the SKO is to address either one overarching goal or like a small set of goals, ideally that flowed from some sort of data about your organization. Like, our competitive win rate sucks. We need to fix that because our win rate is 20%. Right now, we'd like to get it to 25, but we win all our deals where we don't have a competitor in the op, but we get our ass kicked when we do have a competitor in the op. So, and our win rate would go to 30%. That would be a piece of data that FP&A and leadership and like sales operations saw and said, hey, this is probably a top priority for our growth in order to get our reps more successful and grow more efficiently. Cool. That then flows into the goal for the SKO, which then informs the content, which then informs the metrics that are used to evaluate whether or not we solve that. So it really should be all along the steps there. And so in the case of the person who was asking this question about accelerating top of funnel velocity, doesn't everyone want more leads and for them to close more quickly and at a higher ACV and so on and so forth? So I think that you have to which of those problems are the critical path right now, Like, is it the top of the funnel that's the biggest problem? Like, are your win rates really awesome and your reps are underutilized, so you do need top of funnel? Or is it more that your win rates are not amazing and maybe your ACVs could be better, and you have some pockets of excellence where you have reps who are doing a lot better from a win rate and ACV standpoint, and so maybe actually making the engine more efficient down funnel could make more, you could make more out of the leads that are already coming in. So use the data to answer that question, and then maybe prioritize your efforts, your enablement and operations efforts accordingly, which then flow into the thing we're going to focus on from a tentpole standpoint at SKO.
Yeah, I agree. I think that data starts the story and starts to shape, what the SKO is going to be focused on. But I think in terms of, the theme of this is making sure that you can kind of pull all this through all the way through, the year, is that you have to have a report out structure too of how you're tracking towards this new goal. So you can have that at SKO, you can talk about it, you can have, all of the training associated to improving in that area. But if you don't continually go back to that statistic and evaluate your performance against it, you're not going to see traction of that, through the rest of the year.
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, yes, to all of it. The thing that I would add is don't try to boil the ocean at the SKO either. Don't try to cover every topic. Of course, to your point, Pete, it's like, of course everyone wants more leads in this, and like those are both things that we could just spend 2 days talking about how we as an organization are going to get better at generating leads, right? Or we could spend 2 full days just talking about how we're going to do this. So I think just be really precious with the time, and I don't want to say this is a rule because sometimes I think it is better to do some broad strokes things, but I would say narrow the focus to less topics, and again, like what's mission critical. It's not that you're going to ignore the other things, or you might not want to have like a session or two, but I think you're going to get a lot more out of it and a lot more people, and you're going to get that ball further down if instead you had 70 or 80 or 100 people or 10 people all focusing on one topic and kind of crushing that, as opposed to a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And it's kind of like, and because now when they come out of the SKO, it's like there's 90 balls in the air that we've got to kind of start to move. So I think try to yeah, exactly. Let's measure them all and like where are the hours in the day, as opposed to kind of strategically planning how you're going to tackle those throughout the year. So use the SKO to, of course, maybe talk about things, but focus in on, to Christie's point, is it top of the funnel is most important? Great, let's spend 60% of our time there.
The thing that, as you were talking about that, Jake, it was making me think of Christie's metaphor and SAVO's metaphor around Agile enablement, Agile selling, where one of the metaphors I use to think about sales operations and enablement is one of product management, because that's kind of like where I come from. And so at any given point in time, you only have so many engineers. And there's a gajillion different features that you could ship, and there's a gajillion different bugs that you could probably solve. But like you can't do them all at once. You have to prioritize. And so I oftentimes feel that the metaphor I like to use is that sales operations oftentimes is kind of like the product manager of the sales organization. And so figuring out what that top 1 or 2 items are that can be solved with your current resourcing, whether it's how many sales enablement people you have or how many sales operations folks you have or what have you, is really, really important. Now, having a list of all the things that you'd like to fix, that's good, because then you can see what's below the line. And if the things that are below the line are potentially super high ROI, then maybe we can make an argument that we should have more enablement people or more operations people or what have you, but based on that ROI argument that like, okay, cool, these things right here are going to deliver this amount of revenue back to the business in the form of reduced churn or higher, more deals per rep or what have you. We can't get to this guy right now during this SKO. We'll get to it at the next QBR, right? It just happens to not be as gnarly as this guy right here. But it's like, it's cool, we'll get to it, but like this is the more important one right here. Let's nail the hell out of that one.
That's great. I think we've got time for one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But what percentage do you think the average kickoff ought to be regarding enablement versus the celebration, motivation, rah-rah stuff? So Jake, we already know what you want to do. We know it's all about, having a cocktail. So,
I don't know, man. I'm mean. I'd be like, all right, everyone in the 3-point stance, go, sprint. Okay, back to the line. Okay, go.
I think it's got to be both. I mean, no, I think that there's a difference in not all rah-rah things are drinking either. I mean, I think what Career Builder, especially when I spent, I was out there for almost 4 years, they brought in, we would have the kickoff would be Bill Clinton, followed by Malcolm Gladwell, followed by Lou Holtz, and you're just like, this is the coolest company on the planet Earth. So it's like, I think that there's like that Kool-Aid. Like, I think that there's that element that you want to try to build as well. So, I don't know if there's like a set rule. I would say it definitely should lean more on the focus and the drills, the 3-point stance, as Pete said, but you have to have those moments and those places to where people just come out feeling energized. So I say it's like the appropriate amount of, work first, and then energy building second. So whether that's, 70-30, 75-25, somewhere around there, where, again, think about the sessions, even the team building stuff, again, it shouldn't revolve around drinking. It should involve around these other types of things, like higher level purpose and, bringing someone on meditation or something, So I'd say maybe that's it. Maybe 2 out of 3 should be business, or 3 out of 4.
Are you channeling Jeff Weiner there? You're going to do a meditation session in the middle of SKO?
No. I'm a fan of meditation, though.
that's great. How about you, Christy or Pete? Any thoughts to add to that one?
What do you think, Christy?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in planning SKO, there's a lot of time and thought that goes towards, how can we create a fun, engaging, how can we get them energized, confident in our company and the direction. So it's definitely a huge element, and I agree with Jake, not sure the exact percentage, but it has to be there, and where you place it is probably more important than the percentage of, start and end and, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of time and effort that goes into how do we make this creative, how do we make this fun and engaging.
Yeah, I agree. I always sort of wonder if people should have some of those motivational people come at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock when the food coma sets, right?
Yeah.
Something very different to break up the day a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder, actually, as I was thinking about this, I wonder if the answer to that is like, well, everything should be motivational and awesome. The content should just be motivational and awesome.
Totally agree.
Instead of it being like, here's Tony Robbins, I was thinking about it in terms of like importing the sexy. Like, oh, we'll like throw 20 grand at Malcolm Gladwell or whatever, and versus another way of getting people pumped up about the organization is like, holy mackerel, I can't believe how amazing this content is and how much time and energy went in to making me an amazing rep. Clearly, these guys care about me deeply, and like I have no excuse to not crush because look what. So I mean, so there's that component, and then the other thing that I learned from. I mean, I'm a lightweight event organizer, by no means at the scale of like Sales Hacker or what have you, but one of the reasons why we pivoted MSP from these kind of like traditional meetups where you sit back and have a panel talk or a presentation or what have you is because the feedback from around interpersonal interaction, like people were super invigorated from that. So I wonder if you can handle both cases, and I do think I wonder if you can have the motivational pump up stuff that is like in the actual content as well. But then of course
I think
bring Steph Curry too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You get that like blow off steam. Like you can't just all be like, but we spend a lot of time and it's really good. Like sales reps are like, okay, great, more training. Like there is that butts and seat element to it. So I agree with Pete to an extent but I think you do have to have separate time. That's not even about the company, right? It's about you as a professional and your career development or managing time. So I think that you do have to have these like higher level, less company stuff.
A really best way to do it too, and what we've done in the past is bring a customer in, put them on stage. How did you tell the story about how you bought from us, how we implemented, and how you're using our solutions and what you love about it. Gives confidence to the reps and what they're selling, and also gives them a customer story that they can recycle and reuse throughout the rest of the year. So that can kind of infuse both of those, concepts into one.
That's great. So a couple of things. I think we were at the top of the hour, so it's been an awesome discussion. I want to thank SAVO, obviously, for sponsoring this, and Christie for joining us. Pete and Jake, also thank you for joining us. If people want to reach out to you, Christie, how should people get a hold of you or SAVO to learn more about what y'all do?
Yeah, definitely reach out. Go to our website, savogroup.com, and there's lots to learn there. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Pete, how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm the only Peter Kazanjy in the United States, as far as I can tell.
That's pretty sweet. Jay, people want to get a hold of you over your place.
Yeah, sure, awesome. So if you feel free to come to the website, Skaled, SKALED.com. Our blog's got a ton of great content. If you want to reach me, Jake at Skaled is a great way to find me. And as you're looking to accelerate growth in the new year, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and just real quick, and we didn't sort of include this, but Christie, what does SAVO Group do? Pete, tell people about what you're up to, and Jake the same. Let them know. Maybe they don't know what y'all are up to.
Yeah. So, SAVO helps companies improve, sales productivity in many ways. And what our solutions do is really support their sales enablement efforts. And what they really do is make a huge impact on the way your sellers interact, with your buyers. So hopefully you'll reach out to us. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and appreciate the opportunity to talk about this fun topic.
Awesome. Pete, I know you got 6 different hats on. I know. What hat do you want to tell people about today?
I don't really have a specific call to action.
All right.
I just love the opportunity to talk with smart enablement and operations folks, and that's kind of why I started Modern Sales, was a place for kind of the revenue nerds to hang out and dork out with each other. But I've had a super fun time talking with and learning from all of you guys. So thank you very much. I can't wait to have my next sales kickoff when I have 50 reps, because now I feel like I'm going to be a total expert.
Hey, let people know what Skaled is up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do at Skaled is we help great companies accelerate growth. And really what that means is we partner with VPs of sales and founder-led sales organizations, helping them to figure out all the sticky things that tend to come up as you're accelerating growth through different phases of scaling. So we come in and really serve as a number 2 and really a partner, not like a typical consulting firm who's going to tell you all the things that you're doing wrong. We're also actually going to help you to fix them. So if you're thinking about kind of ways to solve challenges around different parts of the sales funnel, from generating new leads to how you work with your current customers, we'd be happy to have a conversation.
Great. Well, thank you all very much, and Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy everything to everybody who joined us. Thank you to the attendees who joined us today. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
All right, see you guys.